I'm Rob.
I'm John.
And this is the Mint One podcast,
where we talk all things NFTs and the rise of blockchain gaming.
Crypto is a fast-moving industry. How do you think perceptions have changed?
They've changed a lot. The sands of Web3 shift very quickly. Let's discuss.
Right. Firstly, as we are British, we must discuss our favourite topic, the weather.
Yes.
Which has been... Yesterday was the hottest day since records begun in the UK, and we will talk about the weather, as British people, we will talk about the weather in drizzle and overcast, which is 90% of our weather.
Yeah.
So yesterday, you can only imagine what people were saying yesterday and how many conversations I had. I was sick of talking about it, but I was also extremely cranky because it was 39 degrees where I was, and my office doesn't have aircon. I said to John before the podcast came on, if we had this arranged for yesterday, I'd have just cancelled because I was just sitting on my. I mean, this isn't a visual you want, but now you've seen my face. I was just sitting in my boxers at my desk and having a shower every 90 minutes.
Yeah,
it was absolutely obscene, and today is still pretty hot. So I will gradually become shinier as this podcast goes on.
I think yesterday was more about survival than anything else.
Survival, yeah.
Yeah.
And do you know what annoys me? Can I just continue my rant? Because
sure, go for it.
I feel very strongly about this, and I've been on my own for like 24 hours, so I've had no one to rant to. Loads of people are saying, "Oh, but Dubai has 40-degree temperatures all the time." Dubai's a desert. Our average temperature is 9 degrees for the year. That's our average temperature. Dubai is a desert, and they have built their buildings and their infrastructure with that in mind. Mm-hmm. So we are not remotely prepared for this. And I melted yesterday. I mean, I lost so much weight in 24 hours. It's chaos. And all these people that are like the BBC were just going and finding nutters on the street of like Southend who are just out at 1 o'clock in the afternoon with no sun cream on, and they're like, so what do you think of the weather? And they'd be like, well, I lived in Australia and this is still hot. And I'm like, oh God, what are we doing? What are we doing as a people? Sorry, completely irrelevant to this podcast, but it is happening.
Well, I think the UK, just to follow on the point about the weather, because we are British, we need to talk about it. The UK just isn't built for the heat. None of British infrastructure is built to withstand any sort of temperature. Like as soon as it got hot yesterday, trains couldn't run, planes couldn't fly, everyone's house was hot as hell. Nobody has air conditioning. Like air conditioning isn't a common thing here. So
it's pointless. I mean, why would you have it?
More than once yesterday, how many times did I go? I think it was 3 times I took the 20-minute walk to my local Sainsbury's just because the entire supermarket is air conditioned. And it was, I don't know, it was maybe 20 degrees, but it was a good respite from the heat.
Yes.
It was ridiculous. I actually, it hit about 1 a.m. last night, and I just took a walk outside, and it was still kind of not unbearably hot, but a lot warmer than it should be past midnight.
It was ridiculous. I went to bed funnily enough, I went to bed at 1 last night, and my child and partner are currently at her mum's. So, I had the room to myself, but we have this little thing, like when you have a baby, you have like this thing that looks like an egg, and it says the temperature of the room, and you have to try and get it between 16 and 20 degrees. That's optimum for a baby, so they don't, overheat and all the bad shit happens. So I had that on for reasons I don't know. I still had it on even though the baby was 20 miles away. And I got into bed and it was 31.1 in my room. I mean, who can sleep in that? And there was no wind. No wind at all. It was just perfectly still. I was just enveloped in heat, and I'm still really quite angry about it.
Yeah, no, I had to move my my portable aircon from my office to the bedroom last night so I could sleep, and I've not moved it back up yet. So I am sweltering up here today.
Yes,
but
I'm getting shinier.
We will muddle through. We will muddle through, regardless. I guess before we get onto the main topic of the pod, wax is above $1 again. Not $1.
$1? Why am I bothering with this podcast?
Wax is above 10 cents again, I meant to say.
Oh, okay.
So
my resignation has been withdrawn.
Perhaps things are on the up. We're above a 1 trillion market cap for crypto in general as well. So, maybe we're starting to see the end of the current bear. Who knows? But yes,
I doubt it.
onto the topic for this podcast, which is kind of how the culture of Web3 has changed over the years. And in the intro, we kind of included blockchain as well with that, because of course, blockchain started, it's 12, 13 years ago now?
No.
No?
That's a common misconception. And so I had maybe 30% of the information I can give you on this now. But
okay.
I wanted to check when blockchain was actually invented. And it's far earlier than people realize. And so I've never actually read the Bitcoin white paper. I don't know if that makes me a bad person, but I've never bothered to read it. Yeah. And I started doing, so I was trying to get an idea of how people perceived blockchain technology when it was first invented. And was it just sort of like this really niche cryptography sort of maths enthusiasts that cared about it, or was it something that the public were aware of at large? And I think it's probably the former, but it goes back way further than I thought it did. So were you making a larger point that you would like to continue with, because I rudely interrupted you?
I was going to make a general point about how, crypto's been around for 10, 12, 13 years and a lot's changed in that time. But that was that was it really. Then you got absolutely railroaded.
I mean that is broadly true still. 2008 is when I think most people mark the start of crypto in inverted commas. Obviously with the Satoshi's white paper. But shall I give you a little history of pre-Bitcoin? Because
absolutely.
I knew a tiny portion of this, and that's why I was so excited to share it. It's not because I wanted to correct you, it's because I didn't know almost any of this. So firstly, digital, I think this really genuinely does play into the whole question of how perceptions have changed in Web3, because you've got to look at where it came from roots-wise and how it's become something that doesn't even resemble what it was initially made for, even though it was made with many of the things we're using it today in mind. So I'd be surprised if you knew this, because I don't think almost anyone knows this. The first attempts at digital currencies was made in 1980s.
Oh, wow.
Did you know that?
No, I did not know that.
I had no idea. They failed. There was one that started in 1989. I'll come back to that one, actually. So the first real mention of blockchain was by the inventors in 1991, which is, again, crazy to me. And this is essentially the alleged birth of cryptographically secured chains of blocks. And it was by two people who should be way more famous than they are. Scott Stornetta and Stuart Haber. They are, I mean, you don't even need to read their CV to know how clever they are, but they've got, between them, they've got a PhD in computer science and a PhD in physics from Columbia and Stanford universities. And they invented blockchain. And what they invented it for was to solve the problem of authenticating digital documents. And what I didn't know is they are cited in Bitcoin's white paper.
Okay.
And they started working in this area. And I find this quite funny. It's kind of a callback, but they started working in cryptography because of zero knowledge proofs. And back then, zero knowledge proofs were just starting to emerge. And now they're so important as we move away from the sort of harvesting of data that we've had from the likes of Facebook selling user data. And do I have to say allegedly selling user data? I don't know. I don't know if I doubt their solicitors are listening. If you don't know what a zero knowledge proof is, anyone, because I wasn't that clear until I worked with a company called Nuggets fairly recently. It's where one party can verify another party's statement as true without sharing any additional information. So this is currently really popular in trying to make crypto payments safer. Mm-hmm. And so this company, Nuggets, that I did some writing work for, they're trying to bridge Web 2 and Web 3 in terms of payments. And they use ZPK to not share anything between parties. So what's traditionally happened is a website will say, for instance, how old are you? And you put your age and your date of birth. And then they say, where do you live? And they receive all this information. And obviously it's become a problem now storing that information and GDPR and all that. But this is how it's traditionally gone. So they've got all this information on you. ZPK uses a different system where instead it would ask yes, no questions. So it would say, is the user over 18? Yes or no. Is the user based outside of the US? Yes or no. And that's all the person gets. So that they'll just get if they were looking at doing a transfer, they'll just get yes, like the transfer can go through because it's ticked all these boxes, but they don't get any information. And basically these guys were working on ZPK and blockchain. They invented blockchain technology. So they are the godfathers of crypto. And I had never heard of them. Did you heard of them?
Never heard of them.
It's kind of sad, isn't it? Like, everyone knows Satoshi, despite the fact we don't even know if Satoshi's a person or a group. And these two literally invented blockchain technology, and nobody seems to know who they are. But I'll continue this brief history lesson, which is sourced from various places. So I was looking up anything they'd actually said on crypto to see if their intentions could marry up with today's sort of view of crypto.
Okay.
They said, so this was Scott Stornetta said, the real concern I had was with the fact that society depends so much on its record keeping. This was about 30 years ago. And so I think he said this pretty recently. He said it to the Bitcoin Association. Back to the quote, and I could start to see that this would be the transition to entirely digital records. So, I mean, he can see the future for one, because that's exactly what happened. And he said, I knew how easy it was to alter digital records without anyone noticing, and felt that if we couldn't find a way to ensure the integrity of these records that we kept, how could we build any sort of trustworthy infrastructure on top of it? Again, he's seen the future. Like, that's exactly the problem we tried to solve with this. Mm-hmm. And then he says, as if this wasn't good enough already, he said, for me, the question was how to create an immutable record. But their first paper was called How to Timestamp a Digital Document, which only goes a very small portion of the way to what they ended up solving. But I think it's crazy how much of the bedrock they laid there in these early stages in 1991, like 17 years before any of this really came to fruition.
Yeah, I think they've almost kind of accurately predicted one of the best uses of, I mean, not just Web3, but of the internet in general, is that if you think of any record, any piece of information going any amount of time back in the past in any field, that's now baked into the internet. You know, we rely on Web2 and the internet for so much of our ability as a species to remember things and remember what the past is. You know, what used to be cave paintings and manuscripts is now just Wikipedia. And Web3 is helping to kind of push that forward and, as you say, making immutable data available to the masses in a sense, especially when it comes to transactions. You know, having that ledger, that public ledger that no human can alter, and it's based on a sort of a consensus network, is, I think, fairly well fulfills their kind of original thoughts behind this technology.
Absolutely. And I don't think they could have predicted how user data would become a commodity that is widely traded against the user's will.
Yes.
And that, you know, ZPK solves that, or at least goes away to solving that. And I just can't believe they aren't more famous, and I think it's a little bit sad that they aren't. But then they were they were creating Bitcoin. They weren't they were creating blockchain. They weren't trying to create a digital currency. But people were using this technology. They were using this technology to try and create digital currencies in the 90s. Okay. So after this happened, people, it kind of shocking to me how quickly people realized, okay, well, let's make a currency using this. So there were loads of attempts. I couldn't be bothered to list all of them because there was quite a few, and many tried, many failed. Yeah. The most famous before Bitcoin is the only one I'd heard of, and someone else said it was the most famous, but it just happens to be the only one I've heard of, which is DigiCash. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
Very vaguely recall.
It didn't last that long. It was created by a computer scientist and a cryptographer, and it garnered a load of interest, but basically the banks wouldn't use it. They wouldn't use blockchain technology, and the company went bankrupt in 1998, which is still 10 years before anything happened. However, this history lesson is just. I hope it's interesting to someone because it's gone on a while now.
It's
I
good to
find
know.
it interesting, so
Yeah.
maybe this is just for me, but still. In the same year, 1998, Nick Szabo created something called BitGold. This is another thing I hadn't heard at the time because I was 10, but I had heard I've seen references to this since, because obviously Bitcoin for a long time was called digital gold, which it no longer is really called that.
Yep.
But that has stuck around for a while, and a few journalists that I follow referred to BitGold. So BitGold was, and again, this really does blow my mind. In 1998, BitGold was created, and it was a decentralized virtual currency using blockchain. It used cryptography, mining, time-stamped blocks, proof of work, and several other things that are just part and parcel with cryptocurrencies. I mean, I want to get this guy. Can we get this guy on the podcast? Can we get
I'd love
Nick
to.
Szabo on the podcast?
Yeah.
Because I want to know if he's bitter or not. Because he created Bitcoin before. I mean, he didn't. There's huge differences, and he didn't have the same intention of. 2008 was the perfect time for this sort of thing to happen. Obviously, with the huge recession and the collapse of the housing market.
Yep.
But still, you've got to think. I did try to create something almost the same as this, and it never took off. But it's called, in multiple places that I was looking, multiple resources refer to it in the exact same way. They say that BitGold was the precursor to Satoshi Nakamoto's Bitcoin protocol. They use those exact words. So, I mean, that is cool. I mean, that's a cool. That would be the best start to a CV I can imagine. But you'd also, I'd feel particularly hard done by that. I was so ahead of the curve that people just didn't even. It's like being a trendsetter in fashion. If you're too far ahead of other trends, you look ridiculous. And then the trends catch up, and they're like, "Oh, actually, he was kind of cool." Like, remember those like skinny jeans, like super skinny jeans? If you wore those when baggy jeans were popular, everyone would be like, "What's it? You're insane! Like, what are you doing? They must be painful." And then the indie Cindy sort of era came along, and everyone was wearing them. And then if you wore baggy, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's if you're too far ahead of your time, you're seen as an idiot, and it's happened, in all industries. But yeah, I had no idea that things went back as far as the 80s in terms of digital currencies and 1991 for blockchain technology. So history lesson complete. I'm going to have a sip of water.
Well, potentially, what if Szabo is Satoshi Nakamoto? Who knows?
Oh, wouldn't that? And he admits it on our podcast.
I don't believe whoever or whatever Satoshi Nakamoto is will ever publicly reveal themselves. Maybe after they've passed or something, but I think we're going to be waiting an awful long time to figure out who the father of cryptocurrencies is, basically. But
I think the mystique is valuable, though. I know it's a bit of a side point.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I think finding out would be disappointing. It's like meeting your heroes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But no, it's interesting to hear that there was cryptocurrencies prior to cryptocurrencies, in a way. There were things prior to Bitcoin that were based on the same sort of rules and ways of working. And Szabo basically invented what a smart contract is. So, a lot of these things that many people associate Bitcoin as having created were concepts from years ago. That kind of Bitcoin just kind of put them all together in a way that was, I guess, a bit more user-friendly, a bit more usable, something people could understand a little bit more. And I mean, if you look at what's the price of Bitcoin today, 30k? It's about 24k. It's gone up to 25% last week. Interesting. But yeah, I mean, that to think that he, or whoever Satoshi Nakamoto is, kind of hit it big with Bitcoin, and Szabo, as you said, potentially doesn't have the recognition he deserves now. It's an interesting history lesson there. But kind of coming on to the point where you were talking about jeans, I can't actually recall a time in my lifetime where baggy jeans were fashionable, but that's kind of besides the point. Over the last 12, 13 years since the founding of Bitcoin, the kind of what you might term as quote unquote the average blockchain user or the average Web3 user, or nowadays the average NFT collector, has changed drastically. If you think back to 2009 with Bitcoin, it was tech nerds, it was programming nerds, it was people that were very invested into these very niche hypothetical uses of the internet. Of course, it was a very small community back then. And then even when Bitcoin started to get a bit more traction, let's say, 2013, 14, it was still, for the most part, internet nerds. And, whenever mainstream media picked up on cryptocurrencies, it was like, hey, all these computer nerds are making all this money off this technology that makes no sense.
Yeah, basically.
And at some point between, let's say, 2014 to... So when NFTs first started kind of entering mainstream culture, maybe 2-3 years ago, that shifted from, hey, these are just internet nerds, to, hey, these are crypto bros, and like young people that are kind of technically sound when it comes to internet, how the internet works, or the internet machine if you're 70 years old, and have now made tons of money. And that, I think from that point is when kind of more casual people came into the space. Like, I think both of us, I know myself, I can speak for, I wasn't aware of the pre-Bitcoin history of cryptocurrencies. I've not read the Bitcoin white paper. I came in relatively recently. I don't have that kind of technical knowledge of how it all works, but I appreciate and have faith in the technology. So I guess you could call me, I don't know whether a casual fan of cryptocurrencies is the way to describe it. But there's a lot of people coming into the community now, and I say the vast majority of people that are getting into Web3 and NFTs and blockchain technology, that their actual knowledge of how this all works is near non-existent. They just appreciate what an NFT is and what it can provide to them, and potentially they just want to be along for the ride to see where this technology goes in future. So I think it's been an interesting, and kind of as NFTs and blockchain technology and Web3 has become more mainstream, it's found a more mainstream audience. I'll say the vast majority of people in the community now are, as I've said, people that aren't as technically sound as they were, say, 5-10 years ago. But for cryptocurrency to become properly mainstream, obviously at the moment, there's multiple wallets, there's multiple chains, there's, are you using a self-custodial wallet or not? Do you know what a nonce is? Do you know what a blockchain transaction is? Do you know how to read, I don't know, not Alcor, although that's a token trading site for EOS tokens. What's the, blocks, that's the one. Do you know how to read all these transactions on blocks, and do you know what all the technical knowledge means? I think at some point in the next few years, in general, we're going to see the blockchain space become far less, at least front-facing, far less technical. I think it needs to be that way if we want the technology to become as widespread as we'd like it to. I feel like you should jump in because I am very much rambling.
No, I was enjoying that, and we do. Our format is more back-to-back sort of soliloquy tennis than interjecting much. Just to point out, so people don't think I'm insane, the reason I laughed at the word nonce is because I was thinking of the company. What
Nonce Finance.
Nonce Finance, who had to change their name because they didn't realise that nonce is very well established slang in the UK for I'm not going to say because I don't know.
Google's your best friend, so go and Google it. Although they've now renamed Nonce Finance to Nibble, which I'm not sure is the best.
It's still kind of creepy.
It's a bit odd, isn't it? Anyway,
it's better. Anyway, yeah.
Moving on.
The first thing I was going to say is, can you imagine someone going back to 1991 and telling Scott Stornetta and Stuart Haber that at some point there's going to be people called CryptoBros for being interested in this? I mean, it must have felt like the furthest thing from bros possible when you're working on high-end cryptography. This shows how far we've come, how far has been travelled, that it's now so mainstream that it has its own subculture that is ridiculed, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think every major subculture in history has been ridiculed. You can't escape that. But it's funny to me that it's something so mathematical, so nerdy, they're called bros because they act like they're bros. And a lot of these people probably don't understand blockchain tech. Not that I'm an expert. But then this comes back to what you were just saying, and this I think is crucial. We shouldn't need to understand it. And I think we've said this before. It's like knowing how to build a car just to drive one. It would be silly for that to be expected. And the degree of knowledge you needed to own a car 100 years ago was significantly higher than it is today. You know, there wasn't check oil, check engine light. There was a lot of maintenance that had to be done on a daily basis. Whereas now you take it in once a year for an MOT, 3 years for a service. I mean, it's so easy. My dashboard tells me when anything is remotely wrong, from my seatbelt to my door to the engine to everything. Everything, and it likes to. It does like to show me those lights work, unfortunately. But the change we've seen is something that we need to see an accelerated version of in crypto, because and this is definitely something we've discussed several times, but we can't expect, we need to cater for the most vulnerable, and absolutely. They need to be protected, and we can't expect people who aren't super into tech to have to understand these difficult processes just to interact with Web3. That's untenable. And if mass adoption is the aim, which we think it should be, and I think even if you don't think it should be, I think that's where it has to head, because it's revolutionary technology and will improve a number of industries, if not most industries. So we need to get to this place where, you know, your grandparents can just fire you over some Bitcoin when you're poor, or send you an NFT they've had for 100 years. Like, we need to get to the point where it's just really straightforward and simple. And that's why we bang on about onboarding all the time. And games like Skyweaver that onboard you without really mentioning what's happening. They just, here's your wallet address, you've now got a wallet, well done, play the game, like you don't need to think about it. Whereas a lot of other games, I remember actually, this is going to go against my point, but I try to be honest, so I will. One of the first blockchain games I played that felt like a real game was on Engine, and I thought, how the hell am I going to sync my wallet with this game? It's going to be a nightmare. But that was actually because Engine had an SDK, and wallet integration was actually pretty smooth and pretty quick, because you could use the Engine app to scan a QR code and then you linked it to the game, which is a good example of probably where we should be around now, if not slightly better than that. But a lot of other games have been utterly insane to set up. Like, you have to go to a separate website to set up the wallet. You then have to get the right keys and the addresses. And then I've even had I can't remember what game it was. One of the games I had to basically do a transaction to prove that it was my wallet. So I had to send like a very tiny amount of crypto. I mean, it was just insane. And it's just not conducive with mass adoption. And we can't, so we have to get to the point where it's just effortless, like online banking. I mean, a lot of the early resistance to online banking was how difficult it was and how it felt insecure. It felt as if you were vulnerable to theft, and that is kind of how you are now in crypto. It's very easy to get scammed, and that's an issue. And I still think maybe I'm alone here, and this is the final point in this soliloquy, so it is coming back over the net to you shortly. One thing I think is still really weird is signing transactions. The way the UI is set up, the way I'm presented with code, and I have a very basic understanding of code. I'm not a developer, sadly. My dad was a computer programmer, but decided not to instill in me that coding was important. So I didn't do it, unfortunately. But that level of understanding to spot a scam is ridiculous. I mean, that we cannot have that. Even things like blockchain brawlers, when I press brawl and then I have to sign in a smart contract, and I get that has to happen, but it can't. Like, am I meant to read that? In other circumstances, yes, absolutely yes. You should be reading that smart contract, but people treat it like terms and conditions. They don't read it. And I understand why they don't read it, but we're at an impasse. We need to figure out how to make this more accessible and easier without sacrificing anything. And I think surely we can.
Yeah, it's been something, obviously I work for Atomica, but something we've been thinking about lately when it comes to kind of warning messages is that we're basically redesigning a bit of the kind of new user experience at the moment, and we want some sort of message to pop up before a new user purchases their first NFT, just asking them to, check the collection name, do a bit of research, blah, blah, blah. But it becomes very tricky to word something like that in a way that doesn't scare people away, doesn't turn them off it, makes them trust it's safe. It's very, very difficult, because if we put something there that's like overly, let's say it's like, oh, if you purchase the wrong NFT, you could lose all your money, or you might be buying non-genuine NFTs or fake NFTs, then people are just going like, well, what the hell is this? Like, I don't want to get into this. Like I said, it's the same with transactions. I mean, whenever you sign into a new dApp on Wax with your Wax wallet, and the box pops up, you can scan it, you can get a general idea for what that transaction will do, but does anyone ever actually check the code and what that smart contract will do on a technical basis? I tend not to, and I don't think a lot of other users will. Same with Ethereum. If you have to sign a contract when you're doing anything on ETH, it will tell you the name of the contract and say, hey, this is generally what this contract will do, but does anyone read the code itself? No, not really. And like I said, we can't really be expecting users to do that, and it's something that will need to become smoother over time whilst retaining the kind of the safety aspect. I'm not sure how we bridge that gap between, hey, crypto, you're responsible for your own holdings, you're responsible for your own wallet, and you should inherently trust these smart contracts and these systems, and nothing's going to be stolen, all of your assets are safe, etc. I think that's a line we're going to have to cross at some point, and at this stage I'm not quite sure how we tackle that problem.
Can I quickly ask you a question? Let's say you find a project, it could be a Wax, could be on Ethereum, whatever.
Yeah.
And you haven't heard about it. You just started with it, and you think, okay, well, I'll have a look at this. Mm-hmm. And then you create an account, and it pops up with a smart contract with a lot of code in it, whatever.
Yep.
What would you do next?
That's a good question. So it kind of depends what that contract is asking me to do. So, for example, if you sign into a brand new Wax game, the first contract you'll usually be presented with and asked to sign is, hey, this dApp wants to know your .wham or whatever. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. I'm happy to accept that. But once you get past that and it's into, hey, you need to sign this transaction to get your assets into the game, or hey, you're going to be staking something, that's when I kind of have to pause and have a deeper look. I think most users at that point, even if they look at the code, won't really know what they're looking at. I think from my point of view, if I look at the code, I'm not 100% sure what I'm looking at, but I get a general gist of what it's doing. So yeah, I wouldn't say I get a second opinion or check that smart contract with anybody else. I tend to have kind of a cursory scan of what that contract is, if it's something that's a bit unexpected. And then just proceed. But if it's a smart contract that's, let's say I'm staking an NFT or receiving tokens, or a game wants to know my wallet address, if I'm honest, I usually just sign them without checking. That's bad practice, but
can be.
Yeah.
I I've had this a few times. Obviously, I look at brand new games. I get contacted with new projects, and they want me to have a look. And I often have to sign smart contracts, and I genuinely presume that I'm the dumbest, most scammable human on earth when I go into these things. I just presume that people are trying to scam me because you know they might well be.
Yeah,
like we've not been scammed yet, but we've had that rug pull project that we were working with. We did a load of checks on them, and then they ended up being a rug pull. They didn't get anything from us, but they did get from a small amount from some people. So I just won't sign them. I leave it. Like I'll go deeper into the. So I'll read it, and if it wants to know my usernames and stuff, fine, don't care. But when it comes to things like staking, that's when I'm mega careful, particularly with a lot of them enforce limits on when you can get that back out, how long the minimum stake time. So surely I know more than the average Web3 user. I hope I know more than the average Web3 user, given that I work full time in crypto. And I would still, if it's too long, the smart contract, or I don't understand some of it, I just won't sign it. And if I'm a little bit unsure, I'll do more due diligence. I'll check the project's status within the community. I'll try and look at the team behind it. I try and soothe myself with those sort of details. So if we're doing stuff like that, then we're obviously quite away from having the infrastructure there so that anybody can safely operate inside Web3 without
absolutely
risk. I mean, scams will always happen. Scams still happen in banking regularly. But I think that should kind of be our benchmark now. We need scams to happen around as frequently as outside of Web3. And at the moment, not that it's rife with scams, but it's so much easier to scam because of the confusion that we need to improve.
Whenever there's a new medium, there's an influx of people jumping on to try and exploit that system to get money or whatever it may be. And as time goes on, and as more people try different ways to scam people, in the kind of the wider community wises up and builds things to prevent these scams or block them. So I think over time, whilst the scam attempts might become more elaborate, that will help the wider community to build ways to prevent them. I mean, as we're recording this, I don't know if you're aware, there's been a mass kind of hacking spree in the last 24 hours. Have you heard of this?
We've been dealing with our own fires because part of Google melted and they were our hosts.
Right.
No, go on, tell me.
So I think it was early this week, maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, Yuga Labs, the people behind Bored Ape Yacht Club and a couple of other projects, put out a tweet saying we are aware and are tracking this kind of malicious group, and they're looking to kind of attack Web3 users through compromised social media accounts in the near future, so keep an eye out. And within the last 24 hours, there's been numerous high-profile kind of Web3 personalities have their Twitters compromised, and they start posting phishing links. Quite a few YouTubers have been affected as well, strangely enough. So you guys know I'm a big Formula 1 fan. There's this big channel called Driver61 who does kind of regular videos on kind of the technical aspects of Formula 1. His videos get 750 million views a piece. He's got tons of subscribers, and his YouTube account got hacked and is now running a live stream promoting Ripple and directing people to a phishing link. So there's a kind of weird kind of Web3 centric kind of hack going on this way, and numerous people's Discord accounts have been compromised recently as well. So I mean, if you're listening to this, especially at the time being, just double check. If your favorite influencer on Twitter or Discord or YouTube or whatever posts something that seems a bit strange, just have some caution before clicking on anything that they've posted. But it's as I've said, as time goes on and people kind of wise up to the most common scam methods, I think the community in general will find ways to kind of block off and prevent them. I mean, when I entered the NFT space kind of February last year, a lot of the scams were quite rudimentary and, from my point of view, pretty obvious. Like, if I get a Discord DM saying, hey, you can get free Discord Nitro here, or hey, click on this link to be whitelisted for this project, I'm like, No. I don't think I'm going to be doing that. But nowadays, I see much fewer DMs of that ilk, and it's more, I wouldn't necessarily say targeted ones, but every now and again it'll be, let's say it's a project that I follow on Wax. I'll get a DM from, let's say it's an account that's basically named after that project. It'll say, hey, we're doing an exclusive sale soon, and here's the details, and here's a link. And I think that's not as obvious as the initial pay you 1/2 a Bitcoin. And I think more people will fall for that currently. But like I said, over time, as people wisen up, the scams have to become more elaborate. And they can only get more elaborate to a point before they become, that it's not really worth the time and money invested to set up the scams in the first place.
Yeah, so I was thinking about some of the ways crypto has been perceived. So that's obviously the topic at the heart of this, is how the perception of Web3 and crypto and blockchain has changed over time.
Yeah.
And I think one of the problems we're kind of still trying to escape is the shady side of crypto, which there is, Chainalysis have an excellent report on crypto being used in criminal activity, and it is less than fiat currencies, percentage-wise, that's traced back to crime like money laundering or drugs and so on. But the problem is Bitcoin, particularly, that Bitcoin's history was very much tied up with Silk Road, which, if you don't know what Silk Road is, please have a Google, because it's a very, very interesting story. But it was essentially a market. It was like eBay for things that could never, ever, ever be on eBay. And I think it took a long while for crypto's image to be rehabilitated from Silk Road. A lot of people, particularly in the early days of Bitcoin, when the prices were starting to rise, a lot of people were still extremely wary of that. And I think we joked about this before, but I'm still convinced there's people that are now multi-millionaires off of selling dodgy stuff on Silk Road.
No, absolutely.
Kind of crazy. But
absolutely.
Yeah, I think we've been rehabilitated in terms of the crypto industry's image has been somewhat rehabilitated from its roots in the Silk Road and all this shady activity. But it feels like now, so what I mean by rehabilitated really is that the media don't mention it as much as they used to. It used to be a drum they banged a lot.
Yep.
Whereas now it feels like they move from that to environmental, the environmental impact, which, just to be clear, I think was fair, particularly with Ethereum and Bitcoin. So a lot of reports, I've said this before, but a lot of reports suggest that the amount of energy usage and the damage it was doing was overestimated and then exaggerated, but it just made for good headlines. But even if it wasn't, it's something we need to improve, because it doesn't need to be, proof of work. It can be proof of stake or delegated proof of stake or so on. And I think it feels like we're coming through. So that was like the next phase. Firstly it was shady, then it was bad for the environment. And now I think we're starting to make headway with that. I see fewer and fewer journalists outside of Web3 mentioning that sort of thing. Although until Ethereum changes to Ethereum 2.0, I think it will probably persist. And now it's like it's unsafe and there's loads of scams. And I think that's kind of what we're in at the moment. What do you think? Do you think that's the third stage of this sort of cynicism we see in media?
I think, just to take a step back, I think even though media sites in general aren't talking about Silk Road anywhere near as much as they used to, there's still that connotation that blockchain and crypto and all that is used for shady activities, and it's all drug dealing and, buying hit for hires on the Silk Road, etc. And I still don't think that, even though Silk Road doesn't mention that, stigma hasn't gone away.
No, probably not completely.
As a more general point, if we look back at any kind of groundbreaking technological advancement, whether that's the mobile phone, the internet, whatever, initially it's just for the few nerds that understand it, And then usually people hate it or say, why do we need this? Like, with email, people are like, oh, just send a letter. Or with the internet, it's like, well, why would I use this? Why would I use eBay or Amazon? I can just go to a shop and buy things. And then it goes to people become a bit more accepting, and then everyone's using it. And I think Web3 at the moment is at that everyone still hates it phase. But I think we're slowly moving into the acceptance portion of where we're at with that. I'm sure someone's done a study on that and has some kind of hierarchy or graph to show, with like names for different sections or whatever. But I can't recall it off the top of my head. But yeah, I think in general, I mean, this is something I've written an article about on NFT Insider relatively recently. Is that the overwhelming majority of mainstream media coverage of crypto, NFTs, Web3 is still quite negative. There are one or two big name sites that try to stay as neutral as possible. But I mean, I talked about Kotaku to death. The way they report on anything NFT or Web3 related, it just blows my mind. So,
PC Gamer. Yeah.
No, PC Gamer, and there's many more. But I mean, as we said before, I think, I don't know if I said it on pod or off, but give it a couple of years and I would be shocked if those same sites aren't starting to write, maybe not overly positive, but at least more neutral and balanced things about Web3 and have turned around to become a bit more accepting of it. And I think once the media sites do that, then the player bases will do. And yeah, I think we're heading to a future where this technology is going to become more accepted and people are going to start to see the benefits of it and not fall for the the over-exaggerations about environmental impact, or that it's all Ponzi schemes, or it's all used for drug dealing. But those stigmas take a while to tackle.
Yeah, so funnily enough, I had a meeting with a pretty big game studio in Web3, and we were discussing the mainstream media coverage and how bad it is. And I was trying to imagine how they're going to row back on this, because they will. I mean, they will have to row back. So I think they're just going to say that, the first, let's say grit. I don't think necessarily that's going to be the game that, changes everything. But let's say grit is that anomaly. It's like the technological singularity that brings everything into Web3. I think they'll say that everything before that just was awful and that they were right, but it wasn't good enough. And my issue with that is that they, particularly people like PC Gamer, who have been tastemakers for 20, 30 years, they ought to have been at the forefront building. They ought to have been supporting the growth of it, not shitting on it from a great height, which is all they're doing. I mean, Dave and I were moaning about an article this week where I say article, it was 151 words, and it was just to moan that Tony Hawk had joined Sandbox. That's it. That was the only purpose of it. It was 151 words is absolutely nothing. Pathetic amount. I mean, you could nearly tweet that rather than write as an article. Yeah. And they're going to have to do this sort of rowing back, which I think is going to be interesting. And that is why I have a folder of screenshots of places like PC Gamer. And I'm going to be like, when we were there plugging away, trying to rehabilitate the image, you were making it as difficult as possible. And now it's valuable to you to speak positively about blockchain technology. Well, actually, I think this is an important point, actually. For the first time, I think it was like 2014 is when blockchain and cryptocurrencies were separated out. Yeah. Because it hasn't. This is part of the history of crypto that we don't talk about enough. But until about 2014, 2015, with like colored coins and stuff, blockchain technology was just cryptocurrencies, really. Mm-hmm. And then blockchain technology is now separated out. And then we saw the rise of things like Ethereum and the many altcoins, but then the other applications as well. And I still don't think that, even though that's been, the case for 8 years now, I still don't think that the public at large really have not any idea. I don't want to be patronizing, but any sort of notion that these two things are separate in any way. And this is why I avoid talking to people outside of Web3 about crypto. Like, I don't say I work in crypto when asked, unless I know that they're in crypto, because I just get into a conversation. People will have the strongest opinions that I just don't want to discuss, which is annoying.
Funny enough, just to jump in there, but sure. I'm currently kind of in the early stages of possibly moving where I live. Moving where I live. What a strange way of putting that. Anyway, we had an estate agent around to kind of take pictures of the place a couple of days ago. And just in casual conversation, they asked, "Oh, so what do you do?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm into crypto and blockchain." Why is it always really awkward to kind of say that to people? Do you feel that as well? I'm 100%. Like, "Oh, I'm in, blockchain and cryptocurrencies," and he was like, "Oh, yeah, I bought into some coins like several months ago." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, what are those?" And he'd say, a bit of Bitcoin, bit of everything, which I mean is more than most people. But then immediately went on to, market's crashed, you mustn't be doing very well at the moment then, blah, 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 which is like, I mean, it's cool, but it seems no matter who, if you talk to anybody who's outside the Web3 industry about crypto or NFTs or blockchain or any part of it, it's, if not off the bat, very quickly goes into a very kind of negative conversation. It's like, oh, you must be losing a lot of money, or oh, that's that thing that's destroying the planet, or oh, that's that thing that gamers hate, isn't it? It's like, come on, man. Like, if it was something that had nothing but negatives associated with it, I don't know if it would be the industry I'd be working in. And I've had friends I've known for years come up to me and say that, and I'm like, you know me better than that, surely. I don't discuss with. I had. I don't know if I mentioned this on the pod, but last Christmas I was at a Christmas. My group of friends from school, there's about 20 of us, and we go out for Christmas dinner every year. And the conversation of crypto came up because we were, I think, at Christmas it was just the start of the dip. And loads of people in my group that had bought cryptocurrencies were just discussing with each other about how much people they knew had lost in this dip, and I just shuffled away because I don't want to discuss it, because I feel like this is something I say all the time, and it sounds like a bit like a line, but it's not. It really isn't. I don't care that much for cryptocurrencies. I see their value and I enjoy them, and I like the borderless payments and the transparency, and I think it has a lot of value, but that's not what interests me. That's not why I work in here. I work because I think blockchain tech is going to revolutionize gaming, and that's that was my draw. But I think what I would love to see, and this might happen over time, is I'd love to see people understanding, and you'll only get this through use cases, that blockchain technology has myriad uses in so many areas. I mean, obviously it has the uses in finance with P2P payments, the international transfers I just mentioned, and borderless money, and then the transparency, blah, 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 blah. But outside of finance, it has so many uses, because at the moment it feels like it's finance, art, and gaming. That's all people think that this world can do, and even that it can't do very well, and blah, blah, blah. But the early examples we've seen already are it can do a lot for logistics, supply chains, healthcare, music, housing, real estate, like they're even looking like voting for government, because obviously you can have your ID verified and your vote will be on chain and immutable. There's so many ways in which this technology can revolutionize modern society, and it sounds kind of like I've gone into cult language there, but there's so much it can revolutionize that I think once people start seeing that it can make almost everyone's lives better, that's when we go into the next stage where people are like accepting it. And one thing, when you were last speaking, one of the things, which was a while ago now because I've been on one, one of the things I was thinking is you were talking about how people are seen, and like you feel a bit awkward and you're like almost ridiculed for being involved in this. I bet absolute carbon copy was when people were involved in the internet when the .com bubble burst. So when that bubble burst, I bet they were having the same conversation. I bet people were like,
I don't work in .com stuff. I just believe in the internet. Like, don't talk to me about .com stuff. Like, I bet it's the same conversations and people having the same problems, that they see the value in something that was briefly overvalued in the wrong way. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm just, I thought as you were talking about that, I'd try and look up some headlines from when the .com bubble burst. And yeah, a lot of them were along the lines of, internet's dead. This technology that was no good in the first place, it's gone. You don't need to worry about it anymore. And the internet's today crucial to the vast majority of our everyday lives. I'm not going to go so far as to say, crypto is going to be absolutely crucial for everybody in 10 years. But I definitely think it's got more use cases and will play a bigger part in the lives of people, of many of you guys listening, than some people might think at this moment in time. So to dive back into the cultish rabbit hole, it almost feels as if, I don't want to coin a phrase here, but okay, fine, I'll coin a phrase.
Coining.
I mean, you've coined a few things on this podcast, so I think it's time for me to do one.
Yep, do it.
There's what I can only describe as the great lie of
dramatic.
Crypto and blockchain and Web3. And I'm not sure if it's mainstream media that kind of started the perpetration of it, but there's always been people saying about the poor environmental impact and that it's only used for scams and blah blah blah. All of this has started from somewhere, and I know with Silk Road there was a direct example where people could point out and be like, look, Bitcoin's being used for purchasing drugs and firearms and hit fires. But the environmental impact and the fact that it's pointless for gamers, etc. All of these ideas that are now kind of widespread beliefs within kind of the Web2 community have obviously started from somewhere and been perpetuated from somewhere and have been picked up by media and influencers and then, distributed to the wider population. I mean, I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist here, but, I think that is the kind of the great lie of Web3 right now, is that it is viewed as this, pointless development, this pointless technology. There's no use. It's just full of Ponzi's and scams and, bad actors, and you should stay a million miles away from it, when in reality, that's nothing like the case. I mean, if I was on Reddit yesterday, I thought, because the Global NFT Summit is happening this week, and I just wrote an article about it, I thought I'd go to one of the London-based subreddits and be like, hey, there's this NFT event happening in London this week. And it immediately got several not very savoury comments to it, being like, some of them were like, ladies, be careful, they might spike your drink, which was like, Jesus Christ, that's going a tad far.
What's that based on?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of what I'm getting at. There's anything Web3, the people in Web3, the brands in Web3, the technology itself, anybody who works at it, anybody who looks at Web3 is just vilified, and I just don't. I don't get where this is all being perpetuated from, if I'm honest. There has to be a source where these opinions kind of first came to fruition, and I don't know, it's just disappointing to see from my point of view, if I'm honest. Some of the less vile comments were along the lines of, I'm just going to stand there and laugh at all of you people buying monkey JPEGs and haha. I'm like, there wasn't one positive comment, and
no, there won't be.
I don't really let those kind of comments get to, but it's like, can there be one person being like, this seems cool, I might check it out, or it's
the opposite. It's cool to
bash.
Fire derision.
Yeah, absolutely.
At Web3, and it's weird because the original, I think the original conspiracy theory on why blockchain technology, cryptocurrencies was trying to be held down was that the large banks saw it as a threat. But I don't think you can play that narrative anymore, because
I think the banks are starting to move into it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, a lot of the major hedge funds certainly have invested in crypto. A lot of the major banks have. I mean, some of them have got land in Decentraland. They've really HSBC, JP Morgan. A lot of the really major banks have invested. So
yeah.
I don't know if maybe that's just a hang up from when perhaps they were pushing a narrative, but I don't know where it comes from anymore.
But are there downsides to the current implementation of blockchain technology? Absolutely. And we've talked about them to death on this podcast. Ridiculous pricing. Some ways some of these, major brands are incorporating NFTs is just ridiculous. I mean, we've talked about Ubisoft's NFTs in the past. They were a joke, quite frankly. So yeah, is the current implementation bad in a lot of areas? Yes, of course it is. Is the underlying technology itself something that should be vilified and hated? No. I think that the technology itself has a lot of useful applications. So, but I think people, I don't want to sound patronizing, but there's a difference between the potential of technology itself and how people are utilizing it at the moment. How people are utilizing it is where people should kind of have a, not derision per se, but should be unhappy about it. But the underlying technology is just say, this implementation is pretty bad, but the technology, it's interesting. I can see it having useful applications. I could see where this might be helpful to me, rather than monkey JPEGs are bad, and everyone who likes NFTs is racist and is selling drugs, or it's a tired trope at this point. It's going to take a very long time for those kinds of associations to wither away.
Yeah, see, I think there's one thing just to clarify is that it's never going to go from, monkey JPEGs, lol, to crypto and NFTs and blockchain is amazing. Like, I can't believe I didn't see it. We're never going to get that moment of a vindication. It's just going to be accepted, and it will just be part of standard life, and people will forget that there was ever really backlash against it. Yeah. Which will be, it won't be quite as vindicating as we might like, but I think that's where it's headed, and that's it'll be vindicating to us, and we will bang on about it, about how we were there when everyone hated it. I mean, so that'll be fun for us.
This isn't a predictions episode, but I wouldn't want to hedge bets as to when that kind of crossover will happen, because I don't think either of us could be anywhere close. I think
it'll be a while.
Yeah, I think you're talking 5 to 10 years rather than any time in the relatively near future. Let's say the next 1 to 2 years. But as we said before, as more brands, as more people come into the space, as more respected figures start speaking positively about the space, and as its benefits keep being applied in worthwhile areas that people find helpful, that transition will start to happen. I think it is happening as we speak. As we're talking, there's people building, useful, viable uses for blockchain technology, and that's only going to continue. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like episode 31, we've gone back to ranting again, but
yeah, but it's ended on a positive note, and I started with an unnecessary history lesson that I thoroughly enjoyed, even though probably no one else will. So we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, and now I'm absolutely sweltering.
I'm so hot. I can't work out because I can't have my own face on the screen while I'm recording, because I find it very odd, very distracting. Yeah. So I don't have it showing. But every now and again, I'm opening the window. I'm going to open it now to have a look. Just to see, am I really shiny? I don't know. My hair is just going all over the place. It's so hot. It's so hot in this office.
That's
Plus,
awful.
As you might be able to tell from my video, the light I've got facing me is I've got a huge LED video light, and it is beaming heat at me as well. And I can't have a fan on because you can hear it, and it will affect. I'm very flustered right now, but that was a good episode. I think that was a good episode.
Oh, it was good. It was good. So before either of us dies of heat stroke, I think we should head to the outro. Yeah. So, Rob, where can we find you?
Yes, before we get heat stroke, and also before my camera gets heat stroke, we've been having we had technical problems with my camera last week, and yes, I am a photographer and sort of videographer, so that's very embarrassing, but my Sony camera is playing up and it keeps disconnecting, which is why you've seen these little cuts. It's not because of something sinister. No, I don't know what that would be anyway. You can find us on tokengamer.io, where we post daily blockchain gaming news, competitions, giveaways, blah, 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 blah. Then we've got the Wax companion app and blockchain gaming news app, Token Gamer, which is on iOS and Android. twitch.tv/Token Gamer, YouTube/Token Gamer News are our Twitch and YouTube channels. We stream on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 9 p.m. UTC. And we've started that new series, the What Is, based on Total Biscuit's WTF Is. So you should be able to see the first 2 episodes of that, which are on ev.io and Forge Arena. And we've got a third one coming. God, what else have we got? I don't know. It feels like we've got so much stuff these days, but yeah, that's probably the bulk of it, I reckon. Where can people find you, John?
So, for the latest NFT news, you can head to nftinsider.io. We've made a few changes to the site this week, a few little tweaks to the homepage, and now we actually have a sidebar. It's only taken me a year and a half, with kind of latest tweets, latest articles, all that good stuff whenever you click on an article. So, playing around with a few things on the site, trying to kind of upgrade the experience for you guys and get the latest NFT news to you in as quick and easy and as digestible a fashion as possible. We do have a sign-up form for our upcoming newsletter on the homepage as well. So if you go to nftinsider.io, scroll halfway down the page and enter your email, you'll be signed up for our newsletter, which, fingers crossed, will be coming out in the next few weeks. For the social medias, it is nftinsider_io, and we have a giveaway for, I believe it's some Dr. Zamzi NFTs at the moment on our Twitter. So head to the NFT Insider Twitter if you'd like to see those. For me personally, it is at Hydropowered, HYDROPWRD, on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Clubhouse,
Facebook,
MySpace, Telegram.
Ask Jeeves.
Oh, Ask Jeeves, that's a blast from the past. Not Ask Jeeves, but yeah, everywhere that you'd want to find me. Still tweeting every day about the latest happenings in the NFT space, so if you want to keep in the loop with what's going on, head there. And again, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, there's currently kind of a wave of kind of compromised social medias and, you know, Discord accounts and YouTubes, etc. at the moment, so just be extra vigilant when you're clicking on links in the space, and you probably want to check your own connections to things as well, and if you want to be extra safe, set new passwords, you know, redo your 2FA, all that good stuff. I think that's actually that's not all from me. I'm going to be at the Global NFT Summit in London this Friday, and I will be in London for a few days, so if you, a dear listener, are in the London area and want to come say hello, just hit me up on Discord, Twitter, wherever, and it'll be nice to see you. But I'm looking forward to that event. It should be good. It's nice to have a kind of a headline NFT event in the UK for once.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to NFT London. That'll be, see if it can keep up with NYC. But yeah, it is good to have some more stuff.
Fingers crossed it'll be better organised than NFT NYC was. As good as the event was, the organisation side could have done with some improvements, let's say. But I've already given them my feedback, so no need to go into it anymore. Okay. I think that is. Sorry. I think that's everything.
My camera has disconnected again, so you're probably looking at a frozen JPEG of my face. I am very angry and very hot right now. But enjoyable episode. And do you want to do the outro in your radio voice, because I like that?
Absolutely. Let's go with it. So, listeners, thank you very much for listening to episode 31 of the Mint One podcast, whether you're seeing my or our wonderful faces on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform. If you are checking out the podcast on YouTube, then do give the video a like and subscribe, so you're informed whenever we publish a new episode. But otherwise, thank you very much once again for listening to episode 31, and we hope you tune in again next week.